Welcome, everybody, to Swimming in Stars Astrology. I am joined here by my special guest, political advisor, Drew Newnam, our strong Capricorn. And we're here to have a little bit of a political discussion, not for the faint of heart, but I'm going to do my best to pose different viewpoints, and hopefully we can talk about the chart of the United States of America, talk a little bit about presidential candidate Joe Biden and our president Donald Trump. And so that's what we're here to discuss during COVID-19. And wearing my Bring Back Pluto shirt. So we can also maybe talk about some Pluto Eris square action going on for everybody. And with that, I'll hand it off to Drew. Nice to have you here.
Oh, well, I'm nice. I'm glad to be here. Things can be stressful sometimes, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I think conversing and having a conversation that stimulates other people to have conversations is always something healthy we can do, and we can still maintain our social distancing at the same time.
Okay. So we've got a chart for the Declaration of Independence,
Mm-hmm.
and we use that as reference for the country.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got um, um, some comparison of Mr. Biden, compare and contrast Biden and Trump.
Right.
So a little bit into both of their charts and how they, and sometimes similar, can be different, etc. Let's see, we're looking at USA, and what's this over here? Okay. All right, I need to, you have taken over my screen.
I have. I can give you command though if you want.
I need to bring up my charts.
Right. Do you want to bring them up yourself? Because I can give you
Sure, I just
command.
need to, I just need to be able to look at it.
Cool. Can you not see the chart I'm sharing right now?
I can see that.
Okay, cool.
We can go from that.
Um,
So we've been discussing this. There's different versions of the US chart. This one has a lot of consensus on it. And the only thing that's going to change in some of these is just the ascendant.
mm-hmm.
But I was just talking to Emery about having a Sagittarius ascendant, which makes Jupiter the ruler. And in my archetypal psychology, astrology, Jupiter is conjunct Sun, so that also makes Jupiter the main planet
The big
for the
boy.
country. Yeah, and it is a big planet. It's very big. Um, which in archetypal astrology, that makes it our country a teacher traveler.
Hmm.
So we're about moving around, expanding. We're about uh, learning, and those planets are in Cancer along with Venus and Mercury. Cancer is the family, the home, so there's a big focus on family and the home for this country. I think that matches. Um, Jupiter in Cancer, if you've ever heard the term manifest destiny, which is what, as a country developed, it was like, we're going to take in all we can. Well, that's Jupiter in Cancer right there.
And it's
That's
conjunct Venus as
expanding
well, which
and
adds to that love of expansion.
yeah, right, and makes it a big value for us. Um, and that happens in the fact that we took over the whole country. Now we displaced the natives who were here in doing so, but when you've got a goal, sometimes you don't look at the little details along the way.
Right.
So that happened. So that happened. And we have Mercury in Cancer. So, and you see this a lot, at least internally, we get emotional when we're communicating and talking.
Hmm.
Sometimes too much, but that's just the way it is, you know. So I had my transits up here, but I can't. Let's see.
Do you want current transits for Denver?
Yeah, well, I had my charts up, but your screen is taking over.
Here, let me do this, Drew. I'm gonna let
Oh,
you.
there we go. Yeah, just put it on reduced. That's good.
I'm gonna let you You can share, let me make sure. You can share your screen too. Let me just make sure. Um, yeah, you should be able to share.
I have multiple screens.
All
So,
participants. Okay, cool. So now you can share if you want, and then hopefully we can both sort of write on what you share or point out stuff. Hopefully that'll work.
how do I share an app, an image on my screen? How do I do
Yeah,
that?
you just hit click the share screen button, and then what'll come up is a little menu of either a whiteboard or your desktop, or if you have like a picture or a file already open.
Ah, there we go. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. So first off, this is a chart I use a lot. And I click share, right?
Yep.
Does that pop up?
It's here. Awesome, man.
It says astrological time map. This is from the Solar Fire program. And you can set this for any amount of time, weeks, months, years. And the transits are on the left, and they go as they go across. So there's 6 transits that the country is going through this year, and I've bracketed it from beginning of February to the end of next January because that will hold all of these. Now, though, at the bottom, that's direct and retrograde motion of the planets
Mm-hmm.
that we're looking at. Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, Eris, and Uranus. And I use this for my readings, for transit readings, and I'll start at the top because I can sort this different ways, and this is by weighting. So the heaviest transits or the biggest planets are at the top, and you go down. So you can see here we have Eris squaring the country's Neptune. So our communication is
Mercury.
is just being disrupted and discordant.
Hmm.
I mean, that's literally from Eris. Yes,
Yeah, and
and
there's people acting violently and
yeah,
people talking violently
yeah,
as
and
well.
people can't talk straight. Now, it's a mess. Now,
Mhm.
the solar fire has some standardized readings, but they don't have it for Eris, or I don't have the latest one. But that's pretty much it. Yeah, our ability to talk to ourselves internally and to the rest of the world has been disrupted.
Well, and Eris is a lot about standing up for yourself as violently as necessary. So,
Yeah,
when we see stories in the
okay.
news and people act out against it in a violent way, or somebody in power says, no, that's not okay, and takes over
Yeah,
power,
yeah,
overpowering, claiming power, being brave enough to stand up, and it's by like whatever means necessary. So, when a person of power uses Eris, it's a little scary. When one of the sort of little people or the citizens uses Eris, it's more like, to be able to have the wherewithal to stand up to larger powers, no matter what the cost.
sure. And one of our main forms of communication is the internet, Facebook, for
Mm-hmm.
example. And so you get people getting pretty violent in their speech,
Yeah.
which is at least I don't know. I think I'm kind of numbing out to it at this point. Like, okay, yeah, yeah, yada yada. You say that, you click that, but I don't know where you are.
Well, we've had
Um,
a polarizing presidency. There's people that feel really strongly in favor of Trump, and he makes people feel a certain way that is strong and that is banded together. And then there's the opposition that also feels just as strong. So it's very polarizing. And then now we have COVID-19, which, has been polarizing as well. There's, people that don't want to quarantine and people that do. And there's people that believe it's a scandal and people that don't. And so it's very this Eris and Neptune, or excuse me, Eris and Mercury square is no surprise. It's like it's very revealing of what we've all been kind of going through in our communication and in our information and with power.
yeah, and as you mentioned earlier, we're going to look at their currently the I'm going to call them planets. They're dwarf planets. Call them what you want. Anyway, Pluto
Celestial
and
bodies.
celestial influences too.
Yeah, I like it.
Pluto Pluto and Eris are at a square, and now this happens over a period of a few years because they're both slow-moving planets.
Yep.
And I did some research the other day, and the last time they were in square was in the first part of the 20th century. Now, trying to match up the transit with manifestations is a little different because back then things moved slower. It took longer for things to build up and manifest.
Mm-hmm.
So back then they had World War I and the Spanish flu. Now they actually happened right after the square, but if you think about it, things didn't happen so fast. It's very likely the Spanish flu was out there earlier on, but it wasn't until the war that it got spread and became a pandemic. So we had a similar situation back then.
Right.
Today, life moves much faster. People can go around the world and much quicker. The virus spreads much faster,
Yep.
and it's a faster moving virus. It's very contagious. So there's an interesting polarity there. So that suggests that this is, and people are saying this isn't going to be over soon.
Right.
Um, Now, something our viewers may know or not, when you have a transit of the outer planets, for sure, they're going to make three passages. They're going to go through it once, they're going to go retrograde, do it again, and go direct and do it again. And so we're in the first part of this transit, which is always in squares and oppositions and difficult transits, it's always the worst part because you don't know what's going on. And the experts don't know everything, and
Right.
people are jumping up and pretending they know stuff, and they don't, because again, Mercury is the one being affected, and so our ability to be truthful and tell the truth is undermined by lack of information, for one, and
Right.
also people who there are a lot of people who want to. This is very common. Uh, we want an answer now. Because again, we're in a faster moving society. We want to know now.
Yep.
And sometimes you just can't do that. And that's kind of what this pandemic is teaching us. Now, at the same time, since Pluto and Eris are in square, that means Pluto is also aspecting our national Mercury. And here's just a bit of the text from Solar Fire. Um, I'm going to, here we go. It's like it says someone else, but someone may be forcing their opinions on you as a country.
Hmm.
Yeah, everyone's forcing their opinion on us. And there's an unexpected crisis.
Yep.
Yes, a pandemic. And that stretches our communication skills to the limit. And the administration now wants to come down on our social media and limit that, which is not good. Um, in general, it's not a good time for negotiations and contracts because people are a putting what do they call it? Put a stick in the cog. People are trying to jam up the cogs
Right.
at the same time.
Yep.
And get this, here, United States, at times you may feel stressed, irritable, and overworked.
Yeah.
Relax as much as possible. And
Yep.
remember that the time will pass and the reasons behind the mix-ups will become clear. Again, we're in the first part of that transit, and get back to this. Okay. Well, actually, we're getting into the second phase of that. So now we are at a point where we can start sorting out our communications. So that's good. It was worse back in February and March. There was no real communication. And
Mm-hmm.
now we're in the second part. And then Pluto will go direct again, and our third part of this will be in the end of the year. So by then, we'll be communicating better, which is what everybody wants.
Kind of a key for November, isn't it?
Yeah. Now, also in November, there's the one, two, three, other four transits all going on. Uh, Now, Saturn has been conjuncting Pluto,
Hmm.
again, starting in February and ending up in November. And it's a conjunction, so it's not too bad.
A
So what
fusing of energy. I guess it depends on the Plutonian energy because Plutonian energy can be regenerative and transformative and healing, or it can be
yes.
traumatizing and power hungry and devastating. So we have to, the more people that are healers or the more that are people that have energy they're willing to put out in the universe that is of a healing. I always feel
Mm.
like this year is so important to put your healing out there as opposed to just being in your bubble and staying away from, of course we're like staying away from people socially, but
Yeah,
we need to not stay away from people emotionally and spiritually and metaphysically and connectively.
sure.
Otherwise it gets worse, you know, a lot worse before it gets better.
And Saturn can be very isolating.
Yeah.
Very, very.
It can
And
also
both
be the
Saturn,
structure though, the structure for
yes,
transformation or the responsibility we
it
have to
is.
transform, and I like that idea.
And I see a conjunction as Saturn, which comes on and says, okay, we need a new structure regarding Pluto.
Right.
And Pluto has our ability to change. It's also the power structures,
Yep.
like the people behind the scenes, the rich, the powerful, the governments, the institutions, all of those things are under restructuring. And so the first part of that is it's breaking down. And interesting, this virus is part of breaking it down. So there's interesting harmony in all of these transits.
Well, this is the
It
predecessor for all the Aquarius action we're going to have. So, creating the restructuring for Pluto is sort
Yes,
of a precursor to Saturn moving to Aquarius, and then later Pluto finally moving to Aquarius. So, it's like the structure we need to make that huge change.
and this puts it well. This transit is good for clearing out the old in order to bring in the new. And I feel that's what we're doing. And a lot of people have said that in social media. It's like, yeah, the new normal will not be the old normal.
Yep.
And so this year is that Saturn part of the process. Um, Uranus is in here too. That's like the third line, fourth, fifth line down. Uranus trining Eris, which is good in a way. Now, Uranus is disruptive, just like Eris can be disruptive. Uranus is more like just changes out of the blue. Let's jump from here to there. We don't know how we got there, and that's very Aquarian. That's
Right.
Uranus. So it just changes that come out of nowhere. Now, in this month, Uranus was beginning that transit, and it will repeat in November and then finish next year. I see that as let's bring in more awareness, kind of that Aquarian like knowledge,
Right.
knowing. Let's we're getting to know a little bit more about those things that are discord in our world. So that's good. It's kind of a learning, kind of an educational thing in that sense. It's
Yep.
in our face, kind of education like sink or swim, because that's
Right.
Uranus. Boom, here it is. Hey, we just decided to stop in for the weekend. That sort of thing. But as it works out, we will process it, and we'll be going through the process of that this year. Uh, I like also here that the next line down, Uranus is sextile Ceres. Uh,
Right.
Ceres, I'm just starting to learn. You probably know a little bit more about it, Emery. Uh, but I have a intuition that it does relate a lot to community
Mm.
because it lies between the individual and Mars and the social norms and Jupiter. And so in between is kind of like that more localized community, but community in general.
It's like our
So I like
harvest and
that
our
we'll be,
creativity and our wealth that's not
yeah,
financial.
yeah, good. I like that. So Uranus is again, ta-da, boom. Here we have the opportunity. It's not as strong a transit as the trine, but it's an opportunity to learn how we can be more community oriented. And again, see how that
Yep.
relates to the pandemic? We're having to kind of come down to the more local.
Yep.
And I think that's a great opportunity. Now, the last Uranus transit is a square. It's squaring the north node of the country. Now,
Oh,
north node
baby.
is your
That's a big
destiny.
one.
It's your destiny. So again, we're getting slapped in the face because this is the first part of the transit. Like, what are you really about, America?
Right.
And so all those three things are being processed and will complete next year, and they're part of the pandemic.
Hmm.
And they also affect our election because we want to say, well, what are we really about? Who do we want in office?
Right.
And uh, that's where I can bring in the other part that I wanted to talk about, the comparing and contrasting with Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump.